Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the Mindfully Curious podcast. My name is Steph, and on today's episode, we are going to be talking to our friend Alan, aka Alan B Cookin on Instagram. During this conversation, Alan is going to be walking us through his journey on how he found his passion of cooking and how he was able to slowly, by following his curiosity, explore that passion of his and follow that into what has now been, for a few years, his professional career, as long as his artistry. And we talk about how he has balanced the requirements of skill building in cooking and in the kitchen and balancing that with creativity. And he will talk to us about his experience coming up in the food and bev scene. We'll talk about some of the stigmas that are usually associated with the food world. And he's going to share lots of tools that have helped them follow the path and keep discovering and evolving his style. Not just in the kitchen, but just how his life has been evolving. We talk a lot about gardening, food that is coming from the ground, growing your own food and cooking it, just really connecting to the whole chain of food and how creativity is a huge part of food and bev and entrepreneurship overall. Alan also shares his love of new discovery of his permaculture. And this was the first time I had heard about permaculture. I found it super fascinating. He is really making a call to the audience if this is something that you are pursuing. He would love for you to reach out to him and kind of talk more on this subject. I will make sure that all of his social media links are found under show notes. And you can also find him linked on the Instagram post that will follow this episode. One of the most valuable parts of this conversation for me was listening to the way he describes nurturing his skills through discipline and how his style continued to evolve as he adapted to different experiences. And one other thing that was a huge takeaway for me from this conversation was how creativity really unlocks abundance. And a beautiful way to talk about this is when he talks about working in the kitchen, and one of the things they start allowing you to do to kind of express your creativity as a newcomer to the kitchen is to cook the staff meal, and how the staff meal is basically composed of the produce that is extra or needs to be used before a certain date, and how that really is a beautiful way for the people who are working in the kitchen to express themselves creatively and also contribute back to their peers and their family I mean, really, it's the people that you're working with on a daily basis that really are your family in a way. So, that link between creativity, sustainability, and abundance was really dope to have reflected through his stories. And of course, during this episode, you're going to find lots of tools for your creative journey, creative walk around, creative workarounds, aka hacks. I hope you enjoyed this episode where Alan will take us on a journey of life, love, and his creative journey with his culinary endeavors. Thank you for being here, for making this all possible. So much gratitude for our guests and our friends over at Sada Collective. Please make sure, if you have a minute, if anything in this podcast resonates with you or you appreciate, show us some love on social media. You will find all the links in show notes. Also, as a reminder, check out Sada Collective's creative community if you are creative or trying to engage in a creative future of any type. I highly recommend you check them out. They offer a ton of free events, and there is so much power in building community around you, especially as a creative. Creative work can get a little bit lonely sometimes, and feedback and support from community is a huge tool in our self-development. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoy this episode with Alan. Don't forget, follow him on social media. Much love, everybody. Peace. Alan, welcome to the show. So happy to have you.
Yeah, happy to be here. This is a first for me. I'm nervous, but very excited to be here. This is great.
Dude, I am very excited too. And good news, just
Yeah.
to let you know, in the mind, it's the same neurotransmitter that gets produced if you're nervous or excited.
Yeah.
So it's just a mental reframe. So, it's just all about excitement here.
Word, word. Well, then I'm just excited.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So I normally like to ask our guests if they can kind of introduce themselves and give us like a Cliff Notes version of how you got to be who you are today. Of course, later we can get into the juicier parts of the story, but
Mhm.
that's usually where I'd like to start. So,
Cool. Well, I was born and raised in the suburbs of Philly. Um, Anyone that knows me, well knows I was pretty energetic as a kid, and I was very hungry, like all the time. Just eating, running around, eating, more running around. So after, like, I don't know, I suppose the cooking happened around 8 to 10. I'm pretty sure my parents just got tired of cooking for me. Like I was eating like 6, 7 meals a day in between like shooting a bunch of basketball and playing music. And yeah, so I just learned how to make random stuff in the kitchen. That's kind of how it all got started. In college, a buddy of mine, Ben Kahn, and I started making our own meals rather than going to the dining hall. We were just tired of the food. We didn't think it was very good. And he heard I could cook, and that's all he needed to hear. So we would like schlep our groceries like a mile to Kelly House where we lived and just like cooked all our meals. And then from there, I ended up in kitchens after graduating. I couldn't really think of anything else to do. And I guess from there, I moved back to Philly and wanted to be closer to family. And the culinary scene up there was booming, so it seemed like a good place to be. And then came back down here. Frankly, I was chasing the love of my life, and we're engaged now, which you know. So
so it kind of worked.
yeah, it worked out pretty well. And I've been cooking the whole time. Kind of trying to blaze my own trail here. I just I quit last month at the spot I was at, and we're moving to Raleigh next week. So I guess
Man, so
there's
much
your cliff notes.
adventure.
Yeah, yeah. I've been moving around.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting that you had to kind of just force yourself to learn how to cook when you were a little kid just by need.
Hunger.
So,
Yeah, need, hunger.
dude, hunger, that's like a primal driver, dude. So, when
Yeah.
you were cooking when you were a kid, what kind of meals were you cooking?
I think so. I think the first thing I actually really wanted to make was like popcorn, just like all types of popcorn. Like we had one of those air poppers, but I remember my mom doing it in a pan, and I thought like, okay, that's like the pinnacle of like popcorn making because the air popper was too easy. Then we had some other apparatus I can't remember, but anyway, just remember getting real when movie night came, just getting really into making the popcorn, and like I was all over it. And from there, I guess like helping with dinner or lunch, my mom and I had a long hot dog phase. As you could tell, it was very like simple stuff. It wasn't, I'm not like Julia Child right out of the womb or anything. But yeah, and then yeah, from there it was just like nachos, and I love rice. I love rice more than anything in the world. So I was a lot of explorations and putting random things in the fridge on rice. And that's pretty much how it developed until like I remember we got cable somewhere in the middle of high school, and I saw Food Network, and I wanted to try stuff on the Food Network and cooking shows on our local PBS station. And yeah, that's kind of how that flower grew.
Wow,
Um,
that's pretty cool. So, what
yeah.
was like the coolest meal that you remember cooking when you were in high school?
Ooh. Like the best meal or like cool. I mean, I was making all
Just like
types of weird
whichever
stuff.
one you were like, damn, yeah, like I did that. Like, I don't know. For me, it would be, I haven't done this, but it would be to like make macaroons because like I would be like, oh my God, that's like super hard, but they're
Right,
delicious and
right.
they're like cool
Yeah,
looking.
okay. I
Yeah.
know what you mean. Definitely, I think bolognese, like a meat sauce, because it was, I don't know, I never know where this stuff came from, but my mom and I just decided like, okay, we should learn how to do this. My mom was like the best meatball maker ever, but we had never worked on like a meat sauce, so we spent all this time like perfecting it. So I've always said like, among a few other things, if I walked into any kitchen in the world and someone's like, make me something, I'll probably just make like a pasta and a meat sauce, and it'll knock their socks off. That was
Wow, dude.
probably it though.
That's really cool because doesn't it take like a long time to make meat sauce?
Like, yeah, I suppose like you could do it quickly if you wanted. I could talk about this for hours. But yeah, I did like in the proper Italian kitchen, most of your pasta cookery, the sauce wise is going to take like a little while. It's going to be like a lot of olive oil and aromatics, and you cook them down forever and ever and ever. If you want to hack that, you certainly can, but um,
Okay, I'm very interested in like how do you hack that? Because I mean, I just recently, I'm not really patient,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
just recently found out that if I slow cook my soup, I can make like a way better tasting chicken soup. And then I found out how to like just really get like the herbs to sit in there so it can
sure.
really like absorb it.
Yeah,
And man, it really has made a difference. So if there's a way
yeah.
to hack it, what is it?
Well, no, you can't. I mean, unfortunately, especially with like herbs and whatnot, like it takes a certain amount of time for certain things to get into your meal. So like I think the term is sofrito, where like it's very finely diced vegetables, usually onion, celery, some carrot, definitely garlic, in a lot of oil and olive oil. And as you cook that very, very slowly over time, the term I've heard and that I like to use is like melted, where like all the vegetables kind of turn into like one homogeneous mass, so that by the time they like make their way into the pasta, you can't really tell that they were ever there in the first place. And doing that takes a lot of time unless you really, really know what you're doing. Um, you can do it faster, but you risk burning it. It also it won't taste as, I mean, I hate the word authentic, frankly, but like, it won't taste as what it's supposed to taste, basically. So
Okay,
yeah,
that
like
makes sense.
a hack is a hack because it's probably not as good as the real thing. But like I
All
said, I could
right.
talk for hours. We should do a whole nother bolognese podcast if we want to go down this road.
But only if we can actually make it and then eat it.
Yeah, maybe we could do that. We'll talk later.
Yeah.
We'll do a joint pod.
I'm getting hungry just thinking about this, like pasta and meat sauce. All right. So you were cooking as a kid, just kind of stepping it up through high school. And then you started just like cooking again in college, kind of out of a need because you the dining hall food was just not cutting it for you. But were you like also going out to restaurants when you were in college? Like, were you kind of like,
Yeah. Exactly what happened? So like freshman year, it was all dining hall. There was like I mean, you're paying a flat fee basically to get as many meals as you want but the food was not terribly good. And like my family and I growing up, as you might be able to tell, we like really took our food seriously.
yeah?
And when me and my buddy Ben crunched the numbers, we found out we could eat like twice as much food for half the price. Like they kind of, like, dirty little secret, all you college kids, like they're charging you more than they need to, unless you're eating like 20 pounds of food a day. And it's better for you to learn how to cook anyway. So yeah, we just kind of like meal planned week by week. And like I said, we would just go get the stuff every I can't remember what day it was of the week, but yeah. And then that's how we did it.
So what
So
kind of stuff are you?
it wasn't necessarily by choice, but we were also going out a lot. But as you could probably imagine, now is way more expensive than both options. So
Right. I just
it was
kind of
the sort of happy
wonder
medium.
like how the local culinary scene, because I don't know, I'm not a chef, but it feels like to me it's a really good town for restaurants. Like there's good food here.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in general, I think it's everywhere in the world, food is getting better and better. But Charleston,
Agreed.
with as like, especially the school has grown, it's invited a lot more families and, well, students, but then by extension, like their families. So a lot more people know about Charleston, and because of that, a lot more talent is coming to Charleston. Um, Now, where that goes over the next 10 or 12 years, that I feel like we've hit a tipping point in how many people have come here versus how many people the city can actually accommodate, which is another conversation. But yeah, I think the food here for what it is, I mean, barbecue has really come into its own. You got like places like Zaobao and Restaurant Two, like really putting out like really good Asian food, among others. And like if you go and venture into North Charleston near where you live, like there's all types of ethnic food from like migrants coming in to do all this construction and stuff like that. So I think it's expanding and improving all the time. It was
So,
a great place to learn how to cook, in short.
oh yeah. So, okay, you go from cooking meals in college. I mean, okay, just real quick, what kind of meals were you cooking there? Because you said you were meal planning in college. So what did
Yeah, it
this?
was like I mean, it was kind of an extension of what we were doing at my parents' house. So like pasta and meat sauce. We had chicken parm pretty much every week, spaghetti and meatballs pretty much every week. Stir fries. I love stir fries. That was the main core. And then we would screw around with like pork chops and steaks. There'd usually be like one or two variable meals every week that we would be like, oh, we should try this. Those are usually the worst ones because we didn't really know what we were doing.
That's
Um,
pretty cool, dude. So you
but yeah,
didn't go to school for
for
this.
cooking.
Like that's
No,
not what
no,
you were
absolutely
doing.
not. No, I was a history major at CFC,
So
College of
what made
Charleston.
you decide to become a history major?
Um, it was honestly, it's just what I was most interested in and what I got like the best grades in coming out of high school. Um, I was a religious studies minor, which of the two was probably actually more interesting. But coming into school, I was thinking like teaching at the college level was going to be like the way to go. And like I said, in terms of academic success, I did way better in history than anything else. Um, that didn't end up working out. Turns out I'm not a very good student, and to be
Hey,
a
but
professor,
when did you you have to keep going to school for freaking ever?
yeah. I got to finish the degree before I can decide that I'm not doing that.
So when was the moment where you decided like, hey, I'm kind of like doing this, but I know that's not what I'm gonna do forever? When did you
Yeah,
decide to, well, first, it's like you kind of have to find your passion and second follow it. So
right.
when did you find it and when did you like really feel like, fuck it, I'm going for it?
Yeah. So I think junior year, I was taking a class on, I think it was literally called Religion and Food. It was taught by a guy named Todd Levasseur. I think that's how you say his name. And it was all about like food ethics and how we use the land, which we'll get into later, and how that basically how food impacts society at large and what the positives and the negatives of that. I mean, the general thesis of the class is that food builds culture, whether it's good or bad, it's always building culture. So if you can identify with that and find ways to affect things positively through the way you grow your food or you make your food or you distribute your food, then society at large will benefit. And that kind of like blew an entire hole in my worldview of like, oh my God, I can just like work with food my whole life. And that's like a way to live. So that was, I suppose, the first time that I decided like, okay, I can work with food. And then I was working as a busser at a restaurant down on the market, to pay rent. And that no, it was the winter after. I just went to the GM and was like, hey, can I move into the kitchen? Like, I think I'd rather do that. And that was how it started.
Wow, that's really cool, dude. So you started working professionally at a restaurant, and then like what was the next step you decided? Because I feel like, let's say you find your passion, you start pursuing it, and then there's so much like artistry that can happen like between, okay, I'm going to do this, and then like how you decide to do it. So
Yeah,
what was your favorite part of that little chunk of your journey?
right. Honestly, so thinking back on it, so I got another job at a King Street restaurant that was very nice. It was a great experience, and it was really hard at first because like you're like home cooking means nothing in no, even if you're good, it means nothing in a restaurant. There's like systems on systems on systems that kind of you have to fit into or you're gonna fall out of the work environment. Like you have to kind of fit in before you can show out, so to speak. So like working as a prep guy where I kind of just had to be really fast and a little bit robotic, there was not like a ton of time to express what I wanted to do. But like probably my favorite time in that period was making like the staff meals, what we call like the family meals. Basically, there's an abundance of random stuff, that shit that you're not going to use for service, and it's kind of in the effort of not wasting anything, somebody on staff is going to have to cook that and serve it to the 30 odd people that come in and out of the restaurant to work every given day. So when I was given that opportunity, I like really enjoyed getting to make staff meal for everybody, because it was like the way I got to kind of like I suppose express myself is the right way to put it, and be creative about what I wanted to make like day in and day out. So it's still probably, if I was in a kitchen right now, it's like my favorite thing to do is just make random stuff for the people who are there.
That's really freaking cool because that combines so many of my like favorite things about creativity, which one of them is creativity like is brings abundance with it. Because
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
there's like you said, there's like excess produce or whatever, and you are creatively like taking whatever, even if it's
Yeah.
not like the ingredients for this meal,
Yeah.
and creating something with it. And it's dope that you get to do it for your peers because that's kind of like an act of love too. So that's really dope.
Yeah. I mean, it's say like the creativity in a kitchen, maybe we can get into this later, but it pretty much grows out of one of two things, and one which we just touched on was like the abundance of things where you just have too much of something, or like you didn't expect that something wouldn't sell, so now you kind of got to use it. And like basically that necessity of, or that ethic of like we're not going to waste anything is what inspires so much creativity in the kitchen. And then the second one is kind of like, you know, unfortunately, like the hardship of like the demanding repetition, do it this way, this way, this way, this way, that can kind of build up someone like me who had cooked his whole life, but never with any regimented authority kind of over me. So you can just kind of like, through the discipline of getting something right every single time in your improvisations, you can get a whole lot better and a whole lot more creative. I mean, I'm sure in your like artwork, you feel the same way. Like in doing something like the 5,000th time, you're going to do it a lot better on a whim, and the flow of everything is going to be way more precise and like nice looking than it was, say, the first time, even though it's coming from the same place.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point you're making there, because it's a key to know and just be aware that basically everything is a skill, because you're
Hmm.
learning something, putting in the reps, and it is just natural that through putting in the reps, you're just going to get better. And,
Yeah.
maybe if you're really good with like kinesiology, maybe like chopping like carrots with a knife is gonna come easier to you rather than me, that maybe I, have like a really shaky hand and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
whatever.
Well,
And
you can
it's
even take it further where like, I mean, there's people far better than me where, if you can cut a carrot really fast, that's great. But like, then you get to a point where it's like, well, I don't want to cut a carrot. Like, I don't want to chop it or dice it. I want to like turn it into slivers or like batons or flowers. Like the better you get at things, the more avenues like that tree of creative thought can like open up and take it into all these different places.
hell yeah. And I feel like there's like a moment where you just like cross this threshold of your skill level, and that's when you really start unlocking all of that potential. Because,
Yeah.
when you're just like barely getting like to knife cutting 101, like you are definitely not going to be in the flow anytime soon.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so important for us to stick with it through it so that we can unlock all of those secret levels, all of those secret skills.
Yeah. Though I suppose I should say, like if we may stick with the carrot, like I've done this with cooks under me who have staged that like a trial shift, and they're making us a meal, and like they're moving kind of slow through the carrot and they're cutting it very slowly. It's like it is always a good idea for somebody just starting out in cooking to like just for a second like take a step back. It's like, do I really even have to cut this? Like, do I have to, what am I doing with this that I have to like put all this work into it? Could I save time and be more creative in my cooking of the carrot, not just the cutting of the carrot? Or like, does the carrot have to be cooked at all? Like all of these things go into like, regardless of skill level, into like making a not just a creative meal but like a very effective one and a compelling one.
Dude, that is a total next level of creativity. And again, unlocking more abundance, because now if I don't have to cut the carrot, like we don't have to pay somebody to sit here and cut the carrot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude,
Absolutely.
hell yeah. See, creativity is the shit, but I am
It's
extremely biased.
no, it's the shit. It's definitely the shit.
So that's really cool that you got to experience all of that.
Yeah.
Did you at that point like sit down and make like a plan for your career where you're like, okay, this is kind of what I want to do and kind of how
Hmm.
I'm going to do it?
Yeah. I wouldn't. I definitely put it in writing. I kept a journal at that time where I was like, I would go home and like kind of recap like this is how. By this point, I was working nights. I wasn't like a prep guy, so I would like come in the early afternoon and get stuff ready for service. Then I'd work service and we'd clean and then go home. Um, and I would go home and kind of like recap, like, okay, this is like what I screwed up. This is like chef got pissed at me for this shit. I should not do that again. And like kind of like formulating this plan of like, you know, there was never I would say like one of those like 3 or 5 year plans, but it was kind of month by month. It's like, okay, I want to like nail this now, and okay, I killed this station and this is easy and I want to move to the next one. And then by that point I was like, all right, I want to know all three stations, which like if you know all three stations, then you are super reliable and you'll get more hours. So it was kind of like building, 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 building. And then once I decided I moved to Philly, I just tried to find like the best possible kitchens to work in. And once I got up there, that was the same mentality that I brought with it.
That's really awesome that you were journaling about this. Now, how did you pick up that journaling practice? Was that something you'd been doing for a long time, or did you start like just to
No,
help yourself with your career?
it was on and off. I think I picked it up and put it down based on like my general mental state. Like I was the kitchen work, and Jenny, you could ask her, like my now fiance, when we were dating, I would come home like kind of like really upset, crying some days just because like I'm getting screamed at and I suck and I'm not getting any better. And in that like initial struggle, it was kind of it I decided like kind of making sure that I'm making incremental progress every day would be like making sure that I knew that was a good way to like maintain my general mental health, I suppose. So like I would write down things that I did every day to make sure that like I could look back on it and be like, okay, like you are doing these things, like you are setting these goals. Sometimes it didn't work that way, but like it was just good for me at that time to have documentation of like what I was succeeding at, failing at, etc.
For sure, dude. And the nice thing about journaling is that it's kind of a way to diagnose yourself. One, you're documenting your experience, and from what you're documenting, you can see like trends and data. And I
Yeah.
mean, how valuable to have that for yourself. Because if you see trends in your data that tell you, oh, every time I work with this person, I have a shitty day, then you might be like, okay, perhaps,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can do something about this or
Yeah.
whatever. So that is really dope.
Yeah.
And man, I can't imagine like just going through an experience like that where somebody's just like yelling at you and making you feel like shit. And how like you must really love cooking to be able or to want to keep pushing past that.
Yeah. I mean, for the record, it's like it's always helpful when you're not the only one going through it. I mean, like it was a kitchen, it was a very intense environment starting out, and like things had to get done every day, and like I wasn't the only one getting yelled at, you know what I mean? It was just like the people in charge who are I have like immense respect for them, and they're incredible to work for, and you don't get to improve in an environment like that without dealing with that for a little while.
I have a
Now,
question though.
do they? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it's just that I think it's crazy to hear that that kind of stuff is going on in this industry where if you saw that kind of stuff going on anywhere, you would probably, I don't want to say report abuse, but I feel like at least, especially younger people, we're so aware of, what's right, what's wrong. And I know that's like all subjective, but it seems to me like when I see social media, we're like, don't do this, don't do that. This is the right thing to
Yeah,
do. So, how is it possible that in this world that we live in, this kind of like abuse is going on in one of the most like popular places like to work?
I
And I don't mean like
suppose.
a space exactly. I just mean like the
Yeah, yeah.
food industry.
Yeah, the general, no, is I mean, that stigma has been around a while. I think for the previous generation, like immediately prior to mine, it was kind of understood that you're going into an environment that's because it's super high pressure and it's demands perfection from everybody. Like people far more successful than me and better than me at this are they endured far worse than me to get where they are. So like when they're training the new people, when my sous chef at this place or whatever place is screaming at me, it's only because he's doing like it sounds cliche, but like doing it out of love, because a guy that he respects a lot and that he learned a lot from was doing the same to him at his last job when he was my age or at my skill level. I think over time it's fallen out of fashion. It's really not a way to like handle your business anymore in the kitchen. I definitely can guarantee you that it's not like something that's done all that often anymore, like the yelling and the screaming and definitely like harsh, like being mean. Um, I did it frankly, like I did get cursed at a lot, but it wasn't with like malice, it was just like, hey, we got a busy day. Like, move your ass. Let's fucking go. Let's fucking go. And if I screwed something up, then you get frustrated with me. And like, it's, you grow out of it. And then the next guy's a little bit better. And the generation after that's a little bit better. Like I said, it's definitely not the environment I worked in the last several jobs.
So it is
It gets better
improving.
year by year. Yeah, it's, but I don't hold it against anybody that behaves that way. Honestly, it's just to a point, I suppose. There is a line, but that general habit of being harsh and being intense and being demanding is only a product of how those people learned. And, they are aware of it and they can fix it, but it's not something that I pass incredible amounts of judgment on them for,
For
because it got
sure.
me to where I am. And I'm like very proud of what I had to overcome. And as I'm sure they are, and I'm sure like anybody else that had to endure stuff like that. So
Yeah, and it's definitely not about passing judgment, but I mean, I'm just really happy to hear that it does keep improving, like you said, year to year, because,
yeah,
ultimately it's just about let's all be on the same level and like support each other. And
yeah,
there's really no reason to abuse anybody, right?
yeah. Well, it's very much like a fraternal environment, and like shit talking happens. It's like, I don't know how many sports teams you've been on, but like it's kind of competitive because that's the best way to build everybody up. And like at the end of the day, once you're off the clock and you're like having shift drinks and enjoying each other's company again, it's like all kind of like in the past, like you don't worry about it. So that's the best form of it. The worst of it, people, it's well documented and that stuff is unacceptable. But in terms of what I endured, like most of the pain that I took home with me was like self-imposed. And to answer your previous question, yes, I did like really want to learn that badly, to where like I'll deal with like whatever to make sure I'm like learning every day. And I'm certainly not the only one. That's like it, you better come into a kitchen with that mindset if you're like ready to get better.
Yeah, and not just to a kitchen, but anywhere.
Or
At
any,
least
yeah,
come in
really, yeah, that's
open-minded.
true. Really anywhere. You better be ready to handle pressure if you say you want to do what you want to do, because it's
So,
going to be all over.
and now, how has your passion of cooking evolved? Because you're about to start a new project where you really get to be super creative and be involved in more parts of the process now. So, how has that developed for you?
Yeah. So I guess since COVID, it kind of changed the dynamics of what a kitchen job is like, at least in my line of work. I'd worked at places that was extremely intimate. Like my favorite jobs were the ones where I was really close to customers and I can interact with guests and like kind of be very much a part of their experience. And with the distancing, the necessary social distancing of like restaurants, it turned it into something that, I'm not taking away from any restaurants that have to do this, and like in the people that work in these places, but it just wasn't something I signed up for. I wanted to work in an environment like that, and it just felt like a good time to rethink what I could do with that expertise that I'd gained. I had kind of, like I said, with the food class, that what broke the doors down and like brought me this way started with this like reimagining the ethics of how food is made. And so now that I've built up this like array of knowledge and skills, I feel like it's a good time to kind of, maintain a day job. Like we all got to pay rent, but at the same time, like start thinking about ways to positively affect society at large and in my immediate community and environment through like what I know, rather than just like going to work every day.
And I think it's cool that for you, your food for love goes, or your love for food goes beyond just the like cooking part, but also in the food, because you are an avid gardener.
Yes, I am.
So how did those two kind of merge together? When did you find that want for gardening? Because it takes a lot of energy to
Hmm.
be a good gardener.
Yeah. Well, so my mom, who also was, as you may have heard, is also a huge support system for me in the kitchen, is an incredibly talented gardener. We have, I honestly couldn't tell you, it's in the thousands of plants in our yard, and then probably hundreds more in our house. She lives and dies with her plants. Like she takes them on trips. She loves plants. So like we lived in a vibrant garden like as kids, my brother and I. And like it was always a necessary aspect of our lives to like have plants, I suppose. Now she was never much of like a vegetable grower, or like she tried apples and tomatoes, I think, but it wasn't something food wise she was like all that interested in pursuing. And so like along with the learning how to cook came kind of like wondering and beginning to learn about how to grow things. So that's kind of where it started.
Wow, that's really cool. I remember the first time I saw your garden, I was just like, wow, that's so cool. It would just kind of blew my mind to think like here in your house, you can grow food that you can eat. And you were
Yeah.
growing so many different vegetables and herbs. And I mean, like enough things where you could just make a meal out of them. So that's
Yeah.
really dope.
We had, so Ben, who honestly my original partner in crime, who owns the house that I'm in right now, um, we're fortunate enough that he owned the property, so we could kind of do whatever we wanted with it. So there wasn't much back there when I got there, so we kind of ripped some stuff out, put some beds in. Within a year, we had, I don't, probably 30 or 40 different types of things. Right now, off the top of my head, there's a peach tree growing, strawberries coming in, like all sorts of lettuces and radishes and stuff. Um, so I should say it's honestly, it is, if you want to scale up, I'm a little aggressive about it, but it's really not at its best. It's not terribly labor inducing, and it pays dividends if you take care of it and water it and give it what it needs. Like it'll pay back 3, 4, 5 fold more. Like I love going into the yard and just seeing things that pop back up. Like I was in the yard earlier today and they're potatoes in the back, just they're there. And if we weren't moving, in like a month I could rip them up and we'd have like some nice little baby potatoes that we can eat. And that happens all the time. Like nature's not terribly hard to handle. You just have to give it what it needs.
Wow, dude, that was so beautiful and like such a truth about nature that it really is all there for us, you know? We think we need all kinds of stuff and we need to go to Whole Foods, buy our stuff there, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's so impressive when you realize that hey, yeah, you can do this, but we're so disconnected from nature.
yeah. It's one of the things I definitely would like. I think in restaurants specifically, actually, you know, they're usually very spacious. Some of them aren't, and those guys do what they can. But like in the restaurants that have the space, like I'm constantly looking at walls and ceilings and like places that get good sun on the south side of the building where it's just like you should just be growing like a wall of herbs, or we pay. I'm not going to get into specifics, but you pay like kind of an absurd amount of money for things that can grow really aggressively if you give them like I said, like what they need. And you could subsist at least part of the year on stuff that you grow yourself. I suppose this would be a great time to start talking about mushrooms, because like growing oyster mushrooms, which cost a whole lot in a restaurant, it's not hard, and it's one of the things I'd love to be able to help restaurants kind of find free avenues to use food that they grow. You know, it's it's a great way to teach your employees about food and how to handle food from the ground up, no pun intended. And like, um, yeah, it teaches you a whole lot. Tomato in April doesn't taste like it does in July, and you won't know that unless you grow it yourself. Or like cilantro doesn't taste like it does in sprout form versus seeding. It's way more intense. Like all these things can teach a kitchen that even on a limited menu, it can diversify everything that you're doing if you just like apply it and put it in your own space.
Wow, that's really cool. And it gives you a lot more like creative options because if cilantro doesn't taste the same when it's just like a sprout, that opens like a whole new world of ways that you could use that flavor.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we had this was up in Philadelphia, but a chef that I worked for, Peter Serpico, who's brilliant, demanded once that we get he knew it was the time of the year for the chives to start flowering, and they put out these beautiful like umbels. These they look like almost like umbrellas or like dandelion things, and they have these pink little tiny pink flowers on them. And rather than put chives on this little like custard we were doing, we would just put the flowers on them, and if you don't grow it or you don't know about that, um you're missing out on perfect opportunity to provide a guest with something they had never seen before or tasted before, you know, and that's like a tiny example, but yeah, there's immense potential. Like if we're here to talk about creative thinking, like, and you want to get creative in a kitchen, like start growing stuff and watch it and just taste it and you'll think of something.
Wow, dude. Yeah, that's blowing my mind for sure.
Yeah.
I saw a video of somebody like making themselves a salad and they were literally cutting the microgreens from their kitchen because they had like an herb wall like you were mentioning. And again, that like
Yeah.
just blew my mind because I'm like, you could have fresh, nutritious foods so easily, but just because we're so disconnected, and see, even now hearing you say that it's easy to grow your own vegetables really is not that hard. It just makes me think, wow, the only reason we're not doing this is because for some reason we just don't have that connection to nature. So do you think you just developed that connection with nature because your mom was an avid gardener, so you were kind of spending time outside with her doing that, or did you just
It
have more
it
activity?
definitely played a role. I mean, the kitchen helped a lot in learning more about food. I don't know where this came from, but pretty early on, in as far as vegetables were concerned, I was just like, well, I should just learn how vegetables grow and how they keep. And when I was like a prep cook, it made sense that like, okay, we have like 150 pounds of vegetables coming into the restaurant every other day. If we don't pack these properly, we're like really losing out on like profit, money, whatever. Just like food is wasted, which I can't stand. So like learning how to store things and how things, are harvested and stuff. It just like kind of, it was something I almost immediately wanted to learn about as soon as I started learning about how to cook it. So it's a combination of those two things. As in everybody, your mother has a lot to do with, how you grow and what you know.
No pun intended for Mother Earth.
Yeah. Oh, yes, indeed.
So I do have a question about mushrooms.
Yeah.
You recently were in the Pacific Northwest and you posted about this. I think it's called like a bracket mushroom.
Yeah, shelf or bracket mushroom. I couldn't find the exact variety. I'm very much in the infancy of like actually studying individual mushrooms, but since I finished working, been reading up a lot on the general behavior of mushrooms and like how they grow and what they do. But I couldn't find the exact one. It was in an old growth forest, like a few miles outside of like the Bellevue, Seattle area.
I just think it's so cool how mushrooms are getting popular right now. Therefore, we're
Yeah.
like getting the chance to learn more about them. And the more and more I hear about mushrooms, they seem to all have, in a way, medicinal properties. I don't know if you know about that shelf mushroom and what its medicinal properties are, but I've seen people making tea out of it.
Right. That one specifically, no. I am not, like I said, not an authority, though I will immediately, I'm gonna plug Paul Stamets. All things Paul Stamets, guys, anyone listening, if you want to learn about mushrooms, this guy's like the foremost mycologist, at least in this country. And in his book, Mycelium Running, you can find all of these things. I think it's the second or third chapter on medicinal properties in mushrooms, and like it blew my mind. It will blow anyone's mind how many different ailments, chronic or not, that mushrooms can help. I mean, far more than that. Like, it's understanding fungi is something I really want to get into, because as far as learning, when I say that in proper habitats, growing things and gardening is very easy, like this is exactly the sort of thing that people don't know enough about, because fungi and the mycelium that connect them are like, Stamets describes them as like nature's internet, where like the pressure points of like things walking, tree leaves falling, um, your boot print is going to tell this network of mycelium where you were and what should and shouldn't grow there, and it's going to help everything around it transport nutrients. They hold water so well, so if you have drought, um, they'll help mitigate that. They help limit forest fires. It's like they do so much to help the general health of the natural world, and we don't seem to pay a whole lot of attention to them, at least not yet. So, I mean, when you talk about medicinal properties, they're the medicine for all that ails like the natural world at the moment.
And I've heard that about them being connected like everywhere, all around the world. And that is just such a crazy thing to think about.
Yeah. There's an interesting thing that he does in the book. Maybe we'll put it on this feed. Um, where there's a picture of like there's some spores, I can't remember which fungi, but he puts food sources at the ends of like three different mazes, and then he puts the spores at the start of the maze, and without error the spores will grow their way to the food system. So basically they're like, I mean, they're not supreme beings or anything, but like they're extremely intelligent for what they are, and they do have um, neural pathways that will guide them and the organisms around them to nutrients.
Wow.
So like, yeah, it's, and like this is the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. There's way more to learn. Um, Thankfully, I'll be up in Raleigh where we're moving. I'll be a lot closer to forests and environments where there's a lot more mushrooms. It's not something you see a lot in Charleston, not in the immediate area anyway. You'd have to go up farther upstate, but I'm happy I'll be closer to them and I can learn more about them.
Really cool, man. So, where do you think you see your artistry evolving since, you're going on a new journey, things are about to change for you? What would you like? Where would you like to take your love of food, your love of, I don't want to say gardening, but I don't know, what would you call that?
Well, so the other thing I've been focusing a lot on is this science of permaculture, which is pretty new. I don't even think it's half a century old, the discipline, and is adapted and adopted by David Holmgren and a long time ago now. And his basically it functions on a general pattern of 12 main points, which I'm forgetting in my nervousness or excitement. Um, but basically, I've been reflecting a lot on how these ethics can help food systems in general. So like there's all these different implications. There's something called food forestry that I would really like to get into in the coming months in the next year, where basically you're designing a plot of land to be a self-sustaining food source um, for whoever. So if you, with proper designing, you can like eliminate any external inputs and it can put out a bounty of food. You plop these in the right places and you could feed any number of people in any number of ways, be it for a restaurant or for humanitarian aid or for like a food desert. So I would love to get into um, any aspect of that. Because cooking, you can take cooking anywhere. Like I said, leaving the kitchen gives me a whole lot more time to get inspired by things. And I will say for anyone listening, if you have any thoughts or you're involved in any of this, please reach out. Um, I'll be listening and waiting because this is very early on that I've started doing this. So
Sounds like a really awesome thing, though. Whenever you said you can drop this garden anywhere and it will just serve as like a self-sufficient way to produce food, literally, I just thought like, oh, you could just deploy them like they deploy these. I don't know if you've seen this, but where people don't have real homes, they are now able to print homes and like make them
yeah,
for
yeah,
them
I've
in
seen that.
like it like literally takes them like a week. So I
Yeah,
just
no, it's
envision like,
immensely
hey,
practical. And
this
there,
is
so
like a
yeah,
seed
the
bomb.
the oldest or one of the oldest permaculture quote unquote institutes, it's really just a giant landscape, is like smack in the middle of like high desert and outside of Albuquerque. Like it took 20 years, but it is what it is. Like it has hundreds of varieties of things, almost all of them edible or medicinal. And it's a place where people want to learn about this within the near vicinity can go and learn. So when I say with the proper planning and execution, you can put these things anywhere. So you just have to be able to read the environment, know how to gather the resources, develop yields, and then adapt to the general um, constraints along the way. And this, it could be done at any scale, like cityscapes, requires a lot more cooperation as cities always will, but it doesn't have to be like a city block. It can be like an apartment and the apartment next to them. It'll affect your yield, but as long as you're doing something, it's a positive. So that's the sort of thing that, yeah, that's the sort of thing I would love to get into, that I will be getting into.
Man, that sounds so exciting. And yeah, definitely if anybody out there listening is into this, reach out because that's the way of the future. It's like we are the ones we've been waiting for. We are going to create all of the
Yeah, I love
solutions to
that.
these problems, you know?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my
yeah,
goodness. It's hard to think about it because now that you know that you're the one you've been waiting for to solve all the world's problems, like there's no way out. Now we're
yeah.
committing to doing the work.
Yeah, doing what I've been doing for not terribly long, about like 7 years, but like um you find, the work is super satisfying and you leave every day pretty tired and like you feel like you got shit done and you obviously worked very hard and but the constraints of time and the tunnel vision required to kind of like get everything done in a restaurant, once you pop out of that, like as I have, it's kind of crazy how much time I have to do things, and like be it gardening or working out or surfing and like and studying. And now that I've kind of like tried to chart this new course, like actually like finding an avenue has been kind of amazing, because like you said, like were the ones we've been waiting for. And now that I feel like I'm at a point where I'm like ready to do it, like getting started is I'm ready to do it, but I'm not sure where I'm going. So I'm just gonna like walk. I'll like haphazardly like strive and stroll to the next thing and then the next thing, and then we'll figure it out from there.
Yes, and really all that matters is that you keep your eyes on your destination. And like you said, even if you can just make a half a step forward every day, as long as you keep the destination in
Yeah.
mind, like that's all you need. Because now you know that's kind of like your compass. You're like, as long as I'm going this way, it doesn't matter how or when, but at least I know I'll be going the right way
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's sort of what you do, right? I mean, you're quite the Renaissance woman. You're all over the place. And
I
like
am all over the place, man.
I'm like I said, for someone who worked in a discipline that's like so kind of one track, like you have one goal every day and it kind of branches out, but you're still doing the same thing every day. To like watch someone like you who's, you yeah, I know you have that interior design thing going or had it, and you're doing this podcasting and your artwork, and like it's just incredible to see somebody so energized by like all this different stuff, because I've never done anything like that before.
Oh,
It's
thanks,
pretty
man. I
cool.
appreciate I appreciate that reflection. Thank you for that. And I I think it's funny for me because my life's mission is literally just empowering and nurturing creativity.
Mhm.
And it's funny because that leaves me so open to everything. And at the beginning of my journey, I struggled and I struggled a lot because we live in a world where there's an industrial fucking recipe for everything. And it
Mhm.
has been bought and sold by our ancestors for like generations. And
Yeah.
now we feel like that is the only way to do things, where in reality, the truth is that there is every way to do everything. And at least in my opinion, it seems like the point of life is for each one of us to figure out what that way is for us. Like, yes,
Yeah.
the industrial recipe is always there if you need, like, backup for whatever, but there's nothing wrong with trying to find another way. I think that's the beauty about being human. We don't have to just act, react, or flee or freeze. Like, we can always keep coming up with new things because we
Mhm.
have creativity.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, studying food, you'll find like, I mean, no offense to anyone that says it, but if you think there's one way to cook anything, that is like, I mean, it's not true. There's ways that you like it, and then there's ways that other people like it. They might be totally different, but like if you travel through the internet or through books or just like physically to different places, I guarantee you're going to see something and you're like, holy shit, that's not the way I do that at all. And then you try it and you're like, whoa, this is amazing. And there's avenues for that in anything. Like, food doesn't have to just be like farm to table. It can be like farm to community to homeless shelter to restaurant to table. It could like take it any way you want to go, because why not? Like, I agree with you. Yeah, any avenue can go anywhere if you want it to.
Hell yeah, dude. So, last but not least, if you could in any way like give yourself in the past advice. So just think about like a point in your life where you hadn't yet found or like really felt into what your passion is
Mm,
before you got like really comfortable with that. If you felt like you were struggling, like what advice would you give yourself if you could go back in time?
yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think first and foremost, like stay focused, because that's, as I said, in leaving a job that was so regimented, it is amazing how difficult it is to kind of be creative in your time and like finding constructive ways to do that, but also like how disjointed that can feel. So yeah, I think remain focused, but also kind of actually within that, remember why you're doing what you're doing. Because I mean, I certainly don't want to take away from anybody who pursues culinary arts for restaurants and for the general success of their restaurant or their personal brand. But I found after many years of doing it, it wasn't really what I wanted to do. Like I got into food to help change lives, change the world, and like not all people do it for the same reason, which is fine. But it was something that took me, frankly, a little too long to figure out. We had to endure a global pandemic and, you know, countless hardships of 2020 for me to be like, okay, well, maybe this is the time. Maybe it all bears out the same way, but I suppose that's what I would say.
There's nothing wrong with trying to create more better in the world, in my opinion, especially
Yeah.
when it's coming from like a place of like pure love and joy. Like, you can't go wrong with that shit.
Yeah, I agree.
Man, thank you so much for coming on and riffing with me. I feel like I know you so much better now.
Yeah, no, this is great. We should definitely, maybe we'll do some cooking ones. We'll
Yeah.
talk off air, but yeah, I think, you know, finding creativity in a kitchen is definitely something we can explore more. It's one of my favorite things in the world to just like open up a fridge of anybody, not just mine. Like I love going into my friend's house and be like, what do you got? And we just like do some shit. So if you want to do more of these, I am more than game. Let's get it.
Yeah, man, I'm always down to co-create and collaborate on like fun creative projects that can, show people that there are different ways you can do things. There's
Yeah,
so much joy that I find in diversity. So, always happy
I
to
agree.
share on that.
Yeah, me too.
My brother, thank you so much. Thank
Later.
you for
Thanks.
doing what you do and doing it how you do it. And I hope you have a great evening.
Yeah, you too. Same to you.
Hey,
All right, much love.
much love. Tell Jenny I say what's up.